Welcome to the KR Films Entertainment channel. To Freddy is the type of movie where I can't quite figure out if it actually exists or if it was just a teenage hormones-filled fever dream with over-the-top violence, plenty of nudity and outrageous acting, but I watched like 12 years ago, so you can believe my shock when one day it popped back into my mind. I googled it and there he was, the movie that has everything a man could ever want: brutal violence, nudity and Christopher Lloyd. The movie begins with someone fishing at a missile effect dig site, and yes, I could have to Google what missile if it meant we can't all be super handsome geniuses like you. It's a time period associated with the middle of the Stone Age, so almost as old as your mom, and I'm no fisherman but surely wouldn't having your BS clanging together beneath the water scare away the fish from you, because my grandfather would always tell me to shut the hell up when fishing on second, for maybe he just didn't like me very much. An open bottle looking like something straight out of S2 Games cutscene forced to the bottom of the lake seconds before the ground begins to violently shake, creating an opening that an ancient race of BAA eating piranha come shooting out of. The man falls into the water as a whirlpool begins to form and swarmed by a school of promise before they school him in the art of having all of your flesh forcibly removed. We then see that it's the beginning of spring break at Lake Victoria as people flocked to dance, drink and wear very little clothing, and we all know how these feel about drinking. And then also fussed about the little clothing. Moon the leech weaver way they don't discriminate with, then introduced to one of the main characters, Jake, as he bumps into one of the side characters, Kelly, who is quite clearly got a thing for before her boyfriend's friend proceeds to from a drink all over him because of a noxious jock character to have noxious jock thing. Jake then goes to pick his little sister up and it's off a job from a sleazy filmmaker named Derek, who for some reason hangs out around little kids. Derek wants Jake, a local, to help location scout for him and his quote wild girl Danny is the para looking to create the Citizen Kane of wild movies, whatever that means. Jake accepts, but the problem is his mother is the local sheriff and he wants him to babysit his younger siblings so she can go ram shouting at half-naked drunk people in the lake. And later on, the sheriff and Deputy Fallen discover the fisherman who went for a danger swims boat with no fisherman inside. That is until the sheriff falls into the water and receives a rather unwanted cuddle from a mangled corpse trying to get all up in a business they pulled body from the water, and the sheriff is contemplating closing the lake, but the deputy advises against it as this is one of the biggest financial weeks for the town. Sounds an awful lot like another subaquatic sea-dwelling people-eating movie, except with a lot more nudity and really bad 2010s dance music. Things are beginning to escalate around the lake as we see a lone cliff diver jump in before he's suddenly attacked by something and pulled beneath the water, leaving a mess behind that looks as if somebody decided to go for a swim but didn't realize that a cycle it suddenly started. Jake, not wanting to miss an opportunity to make some money and look at some scantily clad women, decides to neglect his younger siblings, pay them $60 to keep their mouth shut and leave them alone at the house to potentially burn it all down or whatever it is kids do these days. Scientists have arrived at the area, Novak, Polar and Sam, to investigate the recent seismic activity in the lake, and lucky enough to have for some reason receive a personal escort out there by the sheriff, because I guess she never really do know when pirates could attack. Jake's younger siblings Shane and Laura, cutting Jake kind of $60, decide to immediately defy their brother and break that promise as they get into a little boat to head to an island to fish, which is definitely a great idea when the schools of prehistoric people eating fish roaming around out there. I hear they like kids best and immediately find themselves stranded. There is one of the little ankle biter somehow forgot to type the boat properly and they're forced to stand there and watch it drift out into the people eating infested waters. Laura decides to stand in the water when attempt to flag down some passing boats but fails to realize what's currently in those waters: naked people in glass, apparently because she stands directly onto a piece that slices open her foot, causing her to have an incredibly close encounter of the fated kind of rather hungry child-hating piranha. None has a Deadpool moment as it breaks the fourth wall by looking at the camera. Don't ask me what that's about. At this point, Kelly joined Jake and they both boarded the boat with Derek, and he's filming the models Danny Crystal swim naked beneath the boat when suddenly Jake's mother calls him and he desperately tries to act like a normal human being and not the awkward 17-year-old kid staring at two naked chicks that he definitely is. The scientists discover an underground lake that's now been connected with a passageway due to the quake, and if the channel has taught us anything, it's don't go into creepy unexplored passageways. The last thing we want is subaquatic scent creatures. Sam and Paula dive down into the underground lake, and when they enter the passageway they discover rows upon rows of fish eggs that like to do from flips. Apparently the cast of Finding Nemo rebel against a humanoid overlords, and something suddenly bites Sam's hand as he's surrounded by darkness. He likes off flare to discover that it's not darkness that he's surrounded by but apparently really patient piranhas. Flight. This is the only time for up the whole movie that they've actually waited to attack someone. The line connecting Sam and Paul breaks, and as she hears the distorted screams of a man currently being eaten alive by it, fisheries over the radio. Novak realizes that something is quite right, so dives in after his friends. He finds Paula where she's currently being ravaged by a bunch of really angry goldfish. "Mom, I think you dropped something." Novak on the sheriff Paul off from the lake to discover that she's been turned into a side of jerky. Paula and back on the party boat. Derek convince Kelly to do body shots from Crystal on camera despite it already being made known that she's underage. So not only does he make sleazy movies for cash, he makes sleazy illegal movies with minors in for cash and documents himself doing it for the whole world to see. The only wild thing about this is the sheer amount of wild stupidity emanating from the man. And just Des it's Jake's turn to do a body shot from Kelly, someone he clearly likes and cats quite strongly about. She pukes overboard because you Jake, you're gross. The sheriff and Novak take a fish that was pulled from the water with Paula to Mr. Goodman, the resident fish lover, and he tells them that this type of piranha has been extinct for well over 2 million years at this point, so he theorizes that the only way that they could have possibly survived down there for so long is if they've been fighting each other, so a constant cycle of mating, giving birth and being eaten by said before thing. Sounds like a Saturday night down the average Welsh pub while filming naked power sailors, because Jake somehow now been promoted to cameraman for some reason, zooming in on all of the details of the way Jake spots his siblings stranded on the island before we then see the power sailor into the water and then leave with a non-consensual leg shortening procedure. Back with the majority of spring break goes. Eli Roth decided to take a break from filming his usual over-the-top getting up and quite literally discharging a weapon into the air. Everybody decides that it'd be an absolutely great idea to jump into the water for a bit of fun, and by a bit of fun I mean a bit of death, and by a bit of death I mean a lot of death. Man, I hope the practical effects team got paid good for this movie. Jake picks up saying the Laura from the island after threatening to tell his mama. Derek, kind of a good thing his mom happens to be the sheriff, but the boat gets caught on some debris in the process, which causes the increasingly drunk, high and belligerent Derek to grab Jake around the throat and blame him for what's going wrong. And we then see the Perrons arrive at the party fashionably late and begin their rampage by quite literally eating someone's ass, but not like that, you're dirty-minded. Even panic erupts and people began climbing the scaffolding to the soundstage, with the not so lucky ones being torn to shreds as their limbs are being eaten away from their bodies. This lady has the misfortune of having her terribly CG eyeballs pulled away from his skull. With the amount of stress and I placed on the scaffolding, it begins to tip and sends people tumbling right back into the red food-colored water, in the process giving someone a final destination to a death as a wire snaps from the stage and whips into a topless woman, causing heads because I'm Bob topless armed with a shotgun. Novak jumps on a speedboat to go shoot some water, and Eli Roth character is killed as a boat collides with his head, removing it in the process. And after the apparently hungry sheriff whips up some nice fried fish with her taser, we see hordes of severely injured people are lining the boats in the area as Todd, Kelly's boyfriend, White, entirely forgotten had even existed at this point, floors a boat towards the shore and wipes out at least a dozen people in the process before it comes to stop after the propellers are caught in a woman's hair, and Todd takes a little too much off the top and rips her face entirely off. Derek manages to break the boat free but proceeds to almost immediately crash it into some nearby rocks. It's because of course he does, which causes it to start to sink as it shatters the bottom window in the process, and the boat begins to take on water. We just kind of the opposite of what a boat should be doing really. Derek, Crystal and his cameraman now sent flying into the water, and Crystal is attacked by this group of clearly misfortunistic fish as they go right for her, blatantly ignoring Derek in the process. It's Crystal is trapped underwater as we see them enter for with stomach and exit from her mouth, which isn't how you eat food. Crystal, using a paddle, Danny pulls Derek from the water before proceeding to immediately hit Derek with said paddle as multiple piranha as a currently eating is clearly already very much eaten legs as Derry cries about them eating his little Derek, and after seeing Crystal's breast implants floating away from her corpse, because that's the type of movie watching right now, one of the Perrons perhaps of Derek's manhood while looking at the camera, because I guess we are watching a comedy movie now. Back at the spring break party, countless people are being pulled from the water in various different stages of this. Really hurts, with this lady having a bright future was a magician's assist. And as she turns into two ladies as countless people are desperately trying to escape the lake but is struggling on a counter, the whole being eaten alive thing. Deputy Fallen removes an engine from a boat and uses the propellers to propel countless fish to their deaths. He holds his ground and traits the world's largest Tunis movie until eventually succumbing to their attacks and falling into the war. On the boat with Jake and the kids, Kelly is trumped below deck as the water is rising. Sir Judd calls his mum to inform her of the situation, so she proceeds to American Ninja Warrior herself to a nearby boat before taking off with Novak as this random guy she's literally just met apparently cares an awful lot about this random lady's kids to save her boat from being caught in the rocks too. She froze a line of rope to Jake so she can climb across to help when she gets across everyone, but Jake begins climbing the road back to the boat when all of a sudden the piranha begin leaping from the water and grabbing onto Danny's hair. Eventually they make their way up to her face and begin tearing her apart until she can't hold on anymore. Moral of the story: don't have hair with Jake. Still on the boat and still needing to somehow get to Kelly, he picks up Derek's fleshy sticky corpse and frozen overboard is a nice tasty human-sized distraction with one side of the rope tied to him and the other to the Cher's boat. He swims under the water to get to Kelly. Once he gets to her, he opens the valve on the gas tanks, gives Kelly a nice big kiss, and after is done can hear bits of sick out of his mouth. They enter the water. A later flare to blow up the boat. The sheriff's boat won't start though, leaving Jake and Kelly stranded next to a school of people eating fish in a boat that's about to explode when suddenly starts, and they pulled away from the boat seconds before it explodes, killing all of the nearby fish, and as they both saved from the impending boom have been blown to pieces while simultaneously being eaten to pieces. Mr. Goodman calls over the radio to tell them that these parameters have no mature reproduction organs, they're babies and there's nothing worse than babies. And then the movie suddenly comes to an end with a giant piranha jumping from the water and taking Novak overboard, and I'm left with my question from the beginning of the video being answered. This movie did indeed exist while simultaneously serving as a home-and-filled fever dream with over-the-top violence, plenty of nudity and outrageous acting. In other words, an absolute masterpiece. Before we finish, just wanna let you guys know that I'm launching my YouTube membership program, which will basically give you some perks like cost emojis to use on videos and serve as a nice way to support the channel if you're into that kind of thing. And well, on the subject of supporting the channel, I just want to give a big shout out to all of my patrons, the people who every month help keep this kind of thing going, because we all know how YouTube can be with it. So that being said, a big thank you to Dumb Hunters 26 Free, Rebecca Pitts, A Daddy in Space, Martin Brannan, Natasha Twyman, Jarrett CB, Pasco Mathis, Richard McGowan III, May CJ, Chris Dennis, Wait Not, Ashley Elwins, Christopher Butsky, Joshua Torres, Remy, Fire Goes Fast, Just Brooks, Diary, Robert Zero, Wag Dog, Shiva, Josh Hannon, Billy Whittaker, Money for Jay Slows, Daniel Dickinson, Donnie Do Work and G. So once again, a big thank you to all of my patrons, and thank you to everybody else for watching.